All right, we're going to talk about the E46 330 Ci. Now, in America, the 3 Series is seen as the iconic douchebag car.
You know what they say, it's the ultimate driving machine. It really is the best. Even my f***ing door handles light up.
There's a good reason behind that, and I think it's all part of the fun of owning it. In the realm of German cars, the E46 is actually fairly reliable. BMW has this fantastic diagnostic system so that when something does go wrong, you plug in your laptop and you figure it out quickly and you fix it quickly and you're on the road again. And so, you know, I enjoyed that. The parts were not too expensive, but it needed a ton of parts. I had to fix a lot of things on this car, and it was a high mileage car, so it was expected, but you know, it really added up. On the street, this car is very comfy. We have, you know, layers of leather and sound insulation and all this other stuff to make the car very comfortable, very quiet, sort of refined feeling. But the problem with this is it takes away from the sporty nature because you're adding in all this extra weight. And so even with all this extra weight, the car does pretty well. It's impressive. The car is kind of heavy in stock form and you can pull a lot of weight out, but you know, it does pretty well at both things, so I can't complain. The stock sound system was absolutely terrible, so I had to upgrade that. Not much else to say there, it wasn't great. Reliability, I think we need to separate reliability and maintenance into 2 separate categories because these BMWs will continue to run while they're falling apart. So we see a lot of BMWs on the road that are totally falling apart. You drive them and you say, how can you even feel safe driving this thing? It's terrible. But people continue to drive them and they don't know any better, so there you are. With mine, I went through all the bushings, I went through all the oil leaks. That included the oil pan gasket, oil filter housing gasket, the Vanos oil line. I had to replace the seals on my Vanos unit. I had to replace the valve cover gasket. I had to replace O2 sensors, intake boot, DISA valve, all these things. Tons of little things to get that car running perfect. But once I got it running perfect, it was a much better car, and so it was worth it, and it was a good experience. As far as finding junkyard parts, they are everywhere. So you can go to the junkyard and get very cheap parts. For example, I got my differential for $100 from a junkyard, and then I put a limited slip in it, and that really changed the character of the car. It was faster acceleration, it could drift around now, and that was one of the best mods I did to the car, and so I really enjoyed that. BMW did not put a limited slip in from the factory, which is a bummer because it really helps out with this car. Which brings me to a good track car. It's a good track car platform, absolutely. You can strip a ton of weight out. I pulled out all the interior. I saved, I don't know, over 500 pounds. I got the car below 3,000 pounds by a good amount. That made it really fun to drive. Not only that, but these cars are very forgiving at the limit. It's one of the easiest cars to drive at the limit. Well, very simply, it doesn't do anything you don't want it to. It won't spin out on you. It won't snap. It's slow to react to things, and that makes it very good for a beginning track car. So yeah, as far as a track car, I think it's a great platform. I know a few people asked me about that, and I think it was a great platform. The other issues that we had were the oil pump. The oil pump nut is known to come off at high RPMs, and that can bring down your whole engine. And what I did was I pulled the oil pan off and I just welded the oil nut on there, and I bounced off the red line all the time. Never had a problem. The earlier model M54 BMWs burn a lot of oil, so mine burned a good amount of oil, probably about 1 quart every 1,000 miles, which was said to be normal by BMW. It may be worthwhile to buy the later model 330 Ci. The later ones came with a 6-speed manual transmission, and so that might be worthwhile. And then also the later engines are supposed to be a little stronger and not burn as much oil. Because I got one of the early production 330 Ci's, I got one of the ones with the really loose steering. People complained about that and they fixed it in the later models. So again, I think it's best to buy a little bit later model 330 Ci if you are set on this car. The cooling system. This is an interesting problem because I was on top of my cooling system, really on top of it. But what happened was when I updated to a newer thermostat, the thermostat was opening at higher temperatures. And this is what actually pushed my engine over the edge. I found out after I did it. And so it was kind of too late. But if I could go back in time, I would change my thermostat to a lower temperature thermostat. I would change my radiator to a larger aluminum radiator. That probably would have fixed the problem. I probably would have never encountered any issues at the racetrack with the cooling system. The subframe is known to rip out of the car and you have to weld in these braces. That is not a big deal to someone like me, but I'd imagine that would be a huge deal to someone who doesn't have a welder and doesn't have the knowledge to do that. So I'd imagine some people would be like, oh my God, that's a big deal. So yeah, it could absolutely be a big deal. It depends on your situation. Now, like in my personal situation right now, I blew up my engine, and replacing the engine on this car is very easy, but I'm in an apartment right now and I don't have space to do it. I even found an engine for $800 and I was trying to arrange with the shop to install the new engine, but no one was giving me a good deal on using their space. People are very greedy and that's unfortunate. You know, that's too bad. So anyways, I just ended up selling the car as is, but during the time I owned it, I really enjoyed it and I learned lots of things about it. The brakes are really great. It has large brakes. If you just put a racing pad in there and a racing fluid, you'll be good. The other issue I ran into on the racetrack was the lifter tick. You definitely could put a baffle in that oil pan. What I did was I overfilled the oil, but when I started running stickier tires, I was still getting lifter tick. So I guess as far as reliability, the cooling system was what brought my engine down, but on a side note, engines are cheap because there's a lot of junkyard motors and they have the upgrades available for this car. I know some cars do not have the upgrades available. Also, you can take this further as a track car. You can race it in the spec E46 series, and that's pretty cool. Aside from these little issues, the oiling system, the cooling system, and the subframe, also not having limited slip differential, once you get all those things sorted out, the engine is pretty solid. I guess another important consideration that I want to mention is time. This was one of the most time-consuming cars that I owned. Now, I enjoy working on my cars, but I would imagine a lot of people don't enjoy working on their cars. So I want to be really honest here and say, you know, if you don't enjoy working on your cars, if this is not a passion in your life, then you will probably hate this car. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I don't want someone to see this review and see how much fun I had on the track. That was a ton of work to get the car to that point. Let's be honest on that. That was a ton of work. It's not that easy. If you want a headache-free car, which is kind of what I lean towards these days because I have other things going on, I really like Vipers, I really like Corvettes, and I really like Hondas. NSX, S2000, those are great. The problem with all those cars is they're super expensive, and so it's a trade-off. If you don't have money, or if you have money, you can deal with different things. Everything's a trade-off. There are people who buy the BMW and then they hate that they have to do all this maintenance on them, and they say, I will never buy a BMW again. And it's like, okay, you know, great, do whatever makes you happy. But it's people like this that keep the prices low and keep these cars affordable so that, you know, you and me can afford these things. It's actually a good thing to have these negative people. Another frustrating thing is when I took the car into shops. I have a tire guy that I always go to. I took the car in just to get my track tires mounted. He saw that I had a BMW and he wrote up the bill for more than he normally charges me. Very frustrating dealing with people like that, but you know, that's life. Overall, I really enjoyed this car. I want you guys to expect higher than average repair costs, higher than average time that you have to put into your project, but at the same time, expect a car that you will be really satisfied with when you get it running properly. And yes, people will absolutely think you're a douchebag for buying a lower end BMW. That's just the way it is. Remember, life is way too short to care what other people think. Enjoy your BMW or whatever you decide to buy, and don't worry about anybody else. Thank you guys for watching and enjoy your car.